What is going on, everyone? It is me, the Lone Vault Wanderer, and I'm making a video on Dishonored 2. It's been a while, but just today, Bethesda Softworks on their YouTube channel released a brand new gameplay trailer for the game that specifically focuses on Corvo, the protagonist, of course, from the previous game, the original Dishonored. The question for today's video is, what do you think of the Dishonored 2 Corvo gameplay trailer? Let me know in the comments below. Now, again, I want to be linking that trailer in the description below, but I'll also be showing the gameplay on the screen right now, just so you can see what I'm talking about. But first of all, just a quick recap on Dishonored 2. The game launches on November 11th for PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and also interestingly as well, everyone who pre-orders Dishonored 2 actually gets a free copy of Dishonored Definitive Edition, which is the first game just up-resed a little bit, or it could be a remaster. I think it's very slight, so don't expect too much from it, but it is there, and it's a pretty good deal. You know, it's just a pre-order to get the free version. If you're against pre-orders, then just don't pre-order it and purchase the Definitive Edition separately, but I'm assuming that if you've clicked on this video, you've probably already played the original Dishonored, and if you haven't, you should probably play it because it's a great game. So as I just mentioned, this particular trailer that Bethesda released today focuses on Corvo. Now, a number of the past videos that I've made that pertain to Dishonored 2, I really focused on Emily Caldwin, and I've constantly said and reiterated, even in the podcast with Maddie and Noah, how much more I want to play as Emily as opposed to Corvo, and I won't get into those reasons now, but of course I'm going to go back and play the game as Corvo, because if you don't know, you can actually play Dishonored 2 as either Emily or Corvo, and then you can go play the game again as the other character if you'd like. So I'm still going to be playing the game first up as Emily, and I've made videos on that. I'll have a card pop up on the screen right now that you can click on, and also linked in the description below. But don't get me wrong, I'm definitely going to be playing the game again as Corvo, because importantly, this game does seem to differ drastically story-wise, depending upon which character you actually play as. And in this gameplay trailer, it delves into a little bit more as to Corvo's side of the story and what's actually going to happen if you decide to play Dishonored 2 as him. And I'll get into a bit of that a little bit later on. But first of all, I just want to talk about the gameplay that's visible in the trailer. And it looks fucking awesome, it really does. The first Dishonored game was really known for its gameplay. It had a story, it wasn't all that great, but the gameplay was so fun, especially the powers that Corvo actually had, a number of which actually make a return. So just a bit of a rundown, Corvo's powers in Dishonored 2, as far as we know at this stage, will involve blink, bending time, dark vision, devouring swarm, and possession, and you see a number of those powers being used in this particular trailer. For example, you can see quite early on in the trailer that Corvo bends time when someone is being pushed into an electrical barrier, and then turns off the power and decides to let time keep running so the person actually explodes. And of course, blink is coming back, which is the power where you can travel a small distance instantly. So I'm really excited to use those powers again, but even just more generally about this gameplay that I'm really liking, it's looking just as super bloody, if not more super bloody and gory as the first Dishonored game. The assassinations are great, there seem to be many more variations of assassinations as well, and the combat just seems a little bit more varied and a little bit more fun. I mean, just look at the trailer as to the many ways that you can just take down an enemy, snap their neck, stab them in the back, using blink to your advantage, stabbing people in the chest, throwing them into those electrical barriers that I mentioned before, and even just down to punching. It looks so fun, especially when you start to mix it up with the powers that you have, like devouring swarm, which you can spawn a bunch of rats that devour an enemy. That was a really fun power that I like to use in the first game, and it seems to be making another big presence in the second Dishonored game. So on that front, there's not much more to say, aside from the fact that the gameplay looks fun, the assassinations look fun, and the powers look fun to use. But what I really wanted to get into in this video, because as you all know, I'm a big fan of stories and games, is the particular direction that they're taking Dishonored 2 with regards to Corvo and the story that's going to be explored. So just to recap a little bit, and if you don't want any spoilers as to both the first Dishonored game and the second Dishonored game, it's probably a good time to exit the video now. But if you are interested essentially, just to recap, the canon ending of the very first Dishonored game was that Corvo essentially cleared his name, and Emily Caldwin, who was just a little child in the first game, is crowned Empress of Dunwall. But then at the start of Dishonored 2, everything, while it seems okay, eventually there's a bit of an incident, and then you can pick either Corvo or Emily to play through the rest of the game. And if you pick Corvo, or the Royal Protector as he's also known as well, he has this particular story of vengeance and retribution that's made very glaringly obvious and clear in this particular gameplay trailer. And that comes across really clearly in a number of different senses. First of all, in the first Dishonored game, Corvo wasn't voiced, he did not have a voice protagonist, and now he does, so we can actually hear him talk, know how he's feeling, know exactly what his intentions are, what he's thinking. This is really going to be helping immensely with the main story of the game. As much as I love the first game, I still thought it was lacking a bit in terms of story, and of course not every game has to have a good story, and the game was still great, and the gameplay in particular, and the assassinations were awesome. However, in terms of a story perspective, having a voice protagonist I think really does help immensely. Not every game necessarily needs a voice protagonist, and Fallout is going to come back as an example of that. Maybe Legend of Zelda and other games like that, where you're trying to portray yourself as being the protagonist or the main character. But in terms of Dishonored 2, I think it does make sense that Corvo is a voice protagonist because he is a character. He's not necessarily you. It's not that I'm necessarily trying to portray myself or project myself onto Corvo Attano as a character. He's a character that has his own pre-established backstory, that has his own history. So I think it makes complete sense for him to have a voice. And also as well, on top of that, as I mentioned, it's going to be helping so much with the story. Because if you actually watch this trailer quite closely and listen to what he's actually saying and to a lesser extent doing, he seems to be much more aggressive in this game. Now, you could argue that in the first Dishonored game, depending upon how you played, Corvo was always an aggressive type. You could play as an aggressive player, kill everyone, assassinate everyone, not spare one person. But now, with the added value of having his voice to help tell that story and to help flesh him out as a character, we can actually see much more clearly that Corvo, in this game at least, maybe not the first game, but in this game, Dishonored 2, is going to be much more aggressive, it's going to be much more unforgiving, and this comes across quite clearly in some of the things that he actually says. So for example, one of the phrases that he says is, quote, "No one is innocent, tell me how to kill Delilah." Another one, quote, "Everyone you love, everyone you hold dear, I will destroy." He's not fucking around, essentially. His thoughts and his words, and associated with that, his actions in this game, just seem much more aggressive, and I really do like that. Look at some of the very first scenes in this particular trailer where someone is being pushed into an electrical fence, and this particular person doesn't look like an enemy, it actually looks like an innocent bystander, just a regular citizen. And Corvo pauses time at this particular point with his power, and clearly he has the ability or the option of saving this innocent person, but instead hesitates and then allows time to continue again. So add that in combination with the things that Corvo was saying, he just seems to be much more of a hate-filled person, much more negative, and as I mentioned earlier, much more unforgiving. It doesn't really seem like in this game, of course you can, even though Dishonored 2 presumably is going to allow you to play more of a pacifist role and then more of an anarchist and actually being aggressive and killing everyone, it actually seems that the canon path that Corvo takes in this game is very unforgiving. He's not taking any prisoners, and I just absolutely love this newfound aggressiveness in Corvo. And also something that I picked up on, which is really interesting too, this could possibly be the very last Dishonored story that focuses on Corvo, or that includes Corvo to any extent. At the very start of the trailer, he says something very interesting when he states, "One more time, old friend," while looking at his mask. It seems like this is essentially going to be his last mission, or his last quest, the last thing that he needs to do in the Dishonored franchise. And while of course this isn't confirmed at all, Corvo is getting a bit old, and some of the things that he's saying and just the general feel of this particular trailer and the story that Dishonored 2 seems to be undertaking, I think it's actually quite likely that this could be one of the last, if not the last story related to or incorporating Corvo that we're going to be seeing in the Dishonored games, and then maybe past that, it's going to be looking at his apprentice, or perhaps Emily Caldwin, in more of a highlighted fashion. Of course, in this game you can play both as Corvo and Emily, but perhaps in the next Dishonored game, it's going to be focusing more so on Emily because of, I don't know, something that happens in the ending of the game. Maybe Corvo dies. Who really knows? It's entirely speculation on my behalf, but I think that subtle reference at the start of the video is quite telling in that regard. The Outsider as well is also making a comeback, and it seems like he's also going to have a strong influence in this game, as he did in the first Dishonored game, as opposed to just giving Corvo powers. He actually played some sort of a guiding guardian role in that game, so presumably it's going to be a very similar situation in Dishonored 2. But the very last point that I'll end this video on is the antagonist of the game. So the antagonist is someone that we actually were introduced to in the very first Dishonored game, called Delilah. She's actually the one that has dethroned Emily Caldwin, and it's cool seeing a past character in the previous Dishonored game make such a strong return, because Delilah was the main antagonist in Dishonored 1's DLC. And just touching back on the point of being aggressive, it seems like Corvo is just not taking any shit from Delilah and wants to completely destroy her in a much more of an aggressive way, as opposed to the previous Dishonored game and the way that Corvo was trying to clear his name after he was framed for killing the Empress. Now he just doesn't give a shit. He just wants to kill Delilah, and I'm very interested to see how the story plays out. So anyways, Wastelanders, let me know what you think about Dishonored 2's trailer in the comments below, and until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourself, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.